What about recording or transcription? Do I?
Automatic.
It does it
It's already automatic.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool. Great.
All right, good to go. Give everyone a minute to join and then we'll get started.
Sounds good. Thank you. Okay, so it's 1 o'clock. I'm going to give folks a minute or two to log in, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining us today. As means of an introduction, my name is Amanda Dumschlanger, and I'm one of the career counselors in the OITE. In today's workshop, we're going to be talking about CVs and resumes mostly, and I added in a few slides about cover letters at the end because I do think that those kind of go hand in hand with your document. So feel free to go ahead and ask questions as they arise. You can send them through the chat. For those of you in the room, feel free to just raise your hand and let me know what questions you have. But I'll do my best to try to answer as many other questions at the end as well. Okay, so first things first. Whenever somebody comes to me and is wanting a resume or a CV critique, I often hi, come on in. Sorry, come on in and have a seat. We're just getting started. So whenever somebody comes in with a resume or a CV critique, I always ask some kind of like initial reflective questions. So how are you using this document? Where are you applying? In what sector are you heading towards? Is it nonprofit, government, private sector, industry? And then also in what country? The NIH is a hugely diverse and international place. We have trainees from all around the world. A lot of the feedback that I'm going to be sharing today is really based primarily on like North American or US standards. But just a disclaimer that CVs and resumes are different across the globe. So think about that depending on where you're applying. And then the last question, but maybe the most important question to consider when you're creating these documents is what do you want the reader to know about you? For better or worse, your resume and CV are marketing documents. So these are often the first impression that an employer or a networking connection has of you as a potential future employee or as a candidate applying for a position. And so when you're thinking about what you want the reader to know about you, we actually put together a list of memory jogger accomplishments questions. This is something that's actually included in our CV and resume guide and is really to try and give you the time and space and opportunity to be reflective about what you're most proud of from your career. And so I think too often candidates really default to the first question listed here, what were my job responsibilities? And so when we're going through resumes and CVs, I often see very sort of like task-oriented bullet points, just kind of a listing of what is for better or worse included in a job description. So I want you to think about elevating that and taking that a step further. So not just thinking about like, what were my job responsibilities, but what were the major accomplishments from this position? What skills did I develop? How can I quantify these results? Other questions that you could potentially ask yourself are, what decisions did I make? How did I work with and motivate people? How did I communicate in my job? Was I in a leadership position? How did I make a difference in this position? And these are, again, just to begin kind of that brainstorming process of what you should be marketing and how you should be marketing yourself. Accomplishments driven resumes and CVs are considered the norm now. So they don't want to just see like the tasks that you've done, but really what were the outcomes from your work. Okay. So probably one of the biggest questions that I get about these documents is when to use a CV, when to use a resume, and really what's the difference between these documents. So most of the time, since you're here at the NIH and working in a STEM field, most people are pretty familiar with a CV. Most of you have some sort of version of a CV floating about, and a CV is really a full professional and educational history. There's really no limit to the number of pages that you can have on a CV. You might see your PI CV and it's like 55 pages long, right? So that's like the full publication record, etc. Most of the time you're using a CV for an academic position, research roles, fellowships, sometimes for certain government roles. You'll also see a CV requested. And some of the biggest differences between a CV and a resume are the sections that you include. So as an example, on a CV, you'd often do include your full publication record, whereas on your resume, you don't. So you either put a selected amount of your publications or they're just omitted entirely and made a bullet point. And other kind of key differences, the length is a big one. So for a resume, when you're thinking about if you have to convert your CV to a resume, it's usually 1 to 2 pages for a resume. The rule of thumb is about 7 years of experience per page. But with that said, sometimes I'll see like a very recent graduate from an undergrad program come to me with a 3-page resume. You shouldn't have a 3-page resume as a recent. So you should really have a 1-pager. For people who have a PhD and a postdoc, you don't necessarily have to fit it on 1 page. The 2 pages is totally fine. Sometimes even 3 pages is okay for certain roles that you're applying to. The only companies and kind of sector that I see that's really strict about page length is the private sector. And I've worked with a few trainees who've gone into finance, consulting. They were pretty strict about 1-page versions of resumes. So bear in mind, some of this is going to be company specific, and when in doubt, I would try to check in with the hiring manager. I would try to check in with your network contacts, check in with us at OITE Career Services, and we can try to help you as well. Any questions about the differences between a CV and a resume? Check chat too. No. Okay. All right. Moving on. One of the questions is, yes, you will have access to the slides. Okay, so for those of you who are interested in the federal sphere, federal resumes are very unique. And most of the time people are going through USA Jobs to apply for positions. And even though it's called a federal resume, I really want you to think of it more as a CV. Okay, so it's kind of a misnomer. Federal resume should actually be pretty long and detailed. And they actually have some resume builders on usajobs.gov that you can go through if you want some more samples of how to structure a federal resume, if that's of interest to you in the future. Partnership for Public Service is a nonprofit organization that has the main aim of bringing people into the federal sphere. They have a lot of great content, tips from USA Jobs itself. The GW Trachtenberg School of Public Policy also has a lot of good guides there on federal resumes. So the biggest thing is that a lot of times these are using keywords to sort you very quickly. So having a longer, more detailed keyword-rich resume is going to be really important for you. So as I mentioned, that resumes and CVs are different across the globe. And my talk is really going to be focused on North America and US specifically. So when you're applying for positions in the United States, there are some things that you generally don't include on your documents. So you generally don't include your social security number, your citizenship, or your city or country of birth. There are asterisks by those because for federal resumes you do, okay? So there are some exceptions. But generally speaking, you don't need to list this. So other things that I often see on CVs or resumes from around the world, I see photos a lot of the time. And in the US, that's not standard, so I have to take it off. Height, weight, birth date, references, marital status, number of kids. I've seen that like very personal information on some documents, and that can be pretty standard in other countries, but in the United States, those are considered actually illegal interview questions to ask, so you don't normally provide it on these documents. One thing about references, this is something that I see a lot, and I actually will see people list references available upon request. It's totally assumed that you have references, so you don't need to list that. You should have a separate document of all of your references available to provide, so no need to list that on your document. So what should you be including on your documents? These are just some sample sections. The sections in red are must-haves. So you absolutely have to have your contact information. You have to have your education. You have to have your experience. You would be surprised. I see a lot of these documents, and sometimes I see people just have their name, no phone number, no email. Like, how do you get a hold of you, right? So don't forget to include contact information. Other sections that you can potentially include on these documents, under your experience, you could break it up. You could have research experience, you can have teaching experience, leadership experience. I see sometimes people put public health experience, whatever is relevant for what types of roles they're applying to, clinical experience. Other things that you can include would be honors and awards, professional service, memberships, societies, grants, certifications, licensures, presentations, patents, publications. And then the last two sections listed here in blue are really resume specific. So it's very common to have a skills section on a resume that should include your technical or language skills. I don't want a skill section should just be hard skills. So I'm going to give you some samples on later slides, but I don't want you to include soft skills in here, like good team player, strong leadership skills. Those are considered like soft skills, so you're not going to list them there. The other very common section for a resume is a summary of qualifications. And that can be really tricky to get right. So we have some guides in our resume and CV guide on how to create that, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit more too. This is not an exhaustive list. You can have as many different sections as you want. Your order can vary, and it should be personalized depending on what types of positions you're applying to. As an example, if you're applying to a clinical role, you shouldn't have your clinical experience buried at the bottom, right? So order it according to your audience. Okay, so ways to structure your contact information. There's a variety of different ways to do it. But the main thing to remember is just to have ways that they can reach you. Now, this has changed actually in like the last 2 to 3 years. People are not really including their full like home address anymore. Mm-hmm. So you don't necessarily need to have your address listed. You can put, I do think it is beneficial to put like a general geographic location like Bethesda, Maryland. Mm-hmm. But have your phone number, email. A lot of times people will include their LinkedIn URL, your just general area, and always make sure that everything is professional. So, everything that you're listing, it's like a professional email. You actually have a voicemail box set up if people call you and they do a message. So some small things like that. We had a lot of people fretting during the shutdown about, oh, I've applied to all these jobs and I listed my NIH email on my resume. I don't have access to my NIH email. I can't log on. I usually say, put an email that you can always access. Putting your NIH email doesn't look better, right? They're going to see that you were at the NIH under experience. So just put an email that you're going to always be able to get a hold of. Okay, so I see some questions coming in via the chat, and I'm going to go through those at the end. I'm just going to get through the slides first. So summary objective statement. Typically, this is only for resumes, and it is often the easiest place to adjust for a job ad. But we don't really encourage an objective statement on a resume. So you used to see them very often, like seeking a position in a lab doing cancer research. Sometimes I will make an exception and say, like, if you're going to a career fair, okay, put an objective statement, it's okay. But that's probably the only exception that I say. What we really encourage you to do is to reframe that into a qualification summary. That's going to be highlighting sort of like a quick snapshot into you as a candidate. And so as an example, this person put cancer biologist with 10 years of experience managing multiple projects in the following areas: 6 years in mouse models, 4 years in yeast, supervision of lab personnel, management of lab budget. Great. Like, I think they could have quantified a little bit more. They could have said how many lab personnel. They could have given a range of the lab budget just to kind of add in those metrics and make it seem like a more legitimate experience to the reader. But that's a very good, strong first sample and kind of overview of this candidate. So for those of you who are using resumes and who have more than 5 years of experience, think about adding in a qualification summary to your document. The page 6 on our resume and CV guide has the details of how to effectively structure a qualification summary, and it has some samples as well on how to list that. So it can be a really great thing to have. It's usually a very easy section to tailor depending on the job that you're applying to. And believe it or not, people actually do study this and research this. They do eye mapping studies of where people spend the most amount of time on your document. And it does tend to be at the beginning of your document, which is where your qualification summary is. Okay, other sections that you need to have, your education section. For education, you need to list the location for each school. Your education section should be just formal degrees conferred. So if you've taken classes at FAES or you did a training at the NIH, that should not go under your education section. This should just be like your bachelor's, master's, PhD, MD. If you've taken other trainings or courses, you could have that under a professional development or training section. But again, only formal degrees conferred for education. You need to list the school, the degree, the date that you received the degree. You don't need to put the range. So people typically just put the month and year of the graduation date. Another question that I often get about education section, especially from postbacks, is, do I need to list my GPA? Depending on what you're applying to, if they really care about your GPA, if you're applying to like a program, they're going to want an academic transcript. So, anyway, I would say that's even true for certain jobs too. They're not going to take your word for it, but the general recommendation, if it's at least a 3.0 or higher, then you can include it. Sometimes people will put like science GPA, overall GPA, if they want to note that. Another thing that you can include under your education section would be like a thesis that you wrote, dissertation. That's usually in italics, the title. And then moving on to the experience section. Experience can be anything and everything. Okay, so it doesn't just have to be paid jobs. It can be, volunteer roles, part-time, full-time, leadership roles in student organizations, community service experiences that you participated in. So, think broadly about all of the things that you participated in. When we're talking about these documents, we're often referring to transferable skills, and we really want you to take advantage of all of the experiences that you participated in to showcase that. So that you can label these sections different things: research experience, like I said, public health, teaching, leadership. If there's not like a clear theme emerging from your document, you can also just say relevant experience and then related experience. And that can be a way of kind of differentiating for different commonalities. Here's an example of how to structure your experience section. You do need to have your title, your location, the organization, the dates that you worked there. For research experience, you often include your PI's name or the lab that you're in. Sometimes I'll often see people list projects that they've participated in, and then bullet points. So it's kind of on very like traditional CVs, I don't see a lot of bullet points, but I am seeing, but for resumes, you absolutely have bullet points. And I am seeing a trend toward people using kind of like a CV resume hybrid kind of document. And at which point you probably would have some bullet points listed. So this is a sample of how to structure this. There are more samples in our guide online. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later on about how to structure effective bullet points too. Okay, so I also mentioned the skills section. A skills section is a good thing to have on your document. Keep computer filters in mind. And you can organize and structure your skills section accordingly. So this person put biochemistry, cell biology, microscopy, molecular biology, and kind of listed accordingly. Depending on what makes sense for you, I often also see people put lab skills, computer software skills, languages, and that can sort of be like a general overview of how to filter the skills and techniques that you're listing. Okay, so creating effective resume bullet points. So the other most important section on a document is often your bullet points. So I mentioned the qualification summary is really important. Your resume bullet points are going to be really important too. Try to avoid generic descriptions like my duties included or I was responsible for. Like it's a very passive voice. We want you to have a strong active voice in these documents. So start each bullet point with a strong action verb. On the next slide, we actually have some suggestions for these verbs. But look for the job ad for guidance on what you should be listing. And when in doubt, there is the framework. Some people call it the PAR framework. I call it the STAR framework. And it's actually a behavioral interviewing technique. It stands for situation, task, action, result. In this situation, PAR is problem, action, result. And think about what was the context of your work, right? What actions did you take? Sometimes I see people writing bullet points in terms of like, my lab did this or my PI did this, right? But like really try to take ownership of it. What did you do? So what problems did you encounter in your job? What actions did you take to solve the problem? And what were the quantifiable results from those actions? And that is going to, if you follow that, that's going to give you a really robust outcome-driven bullet point. Your bullets do not have to be short. So sometimes I see bullet points that are like 4 words. So your bullets can go into more detail, and they probably should, to kind of encompass those keywords. This is a copy of one of our pages in our resume and CV guide. We've listed a lot of synonyms and sample action verbs to kind of give you some inspiration on what to include in your document, but when in doubt, look to your job ad. All right, so writing bullet points, what we often see in this is people will say excellent verbal and written communication skills. But really what we should be seeing is I presented X posters and Y talks, I discussed results, I wrote SOPs, journal articles, edited lab grants, manuscripts, facilitated group discussions, negotiated. So thinking about like just communication skills, there are so many things that go into a communication skills, right? So don't tell them, show them the data, right? Show them the results from your experiences. It's going to be, when I see something like very broad and vague on a bullet point, I'm like, I have excellent skills in this. It just makes me wonder, really, how do I know that? How can you prove that? So make sure that you're doing that throughout your documents. And luckily for you all, you're gaining a lot of skill and research. So, sometimes I'll work with trainees who will say things like, oh, I just pipette, or I didn't really gain a lot from this experience. But think about the broad skills that you're gaining. So you're often, gathering information, you're solving problems, you're analyzing data, you're evaluating, you're collaborating with others, you're training others, you're initiating new ideas. Like there's a lot that goes into it. So, think creatively and don't minimize the experiences that you have. You're going to be the only person that really sells yourself. So this is your marketing document and your chance to do so. So definitely take advantage of it. So what are search committees looking for? Obviously, this is going to vary depending on what you're looking at. But often when in doubt, most organizations are looking for three things: strong analytical skills, communication skills, and the ability to work well on a diverse team. Okay. So if you're like, I'm not really sure what I should highlight, go to those three. Okay. Other things that they're looking for your a track record of excellence. So the best predictor of your future behavior is your past behavior. And so really your resume or your CV is that track record of your past behavior. So show the evidence, of all of your skills, the evidence of your leadership, your ability to work well with others, and how you're a good fit for that department. And most importantly, your documents need to be tailored for the job ad. So anytime that you're applying to an online posting, you need to assume that your documents are going through an applicant tracking system. I often hear people refer to the job search as a black hole. Like my resume is just out there, right? We don't know where. Anytime that you're going through like a Workday application, USA Jobs, any online portal that you're not emailing a specific person your documents, they're most likely using an applicant tracking system. And ATS systems are very particular about the way that they like your resume and CV to appear. So ATS systems do not like hyperlinks. So usually when I go through a resume, I right click and hyperlink everything. If they don't like templates, columns, headers, and footers are often not read. Okay. So when you have those in your document, the other thing that I think I forgot to list, color. So if you have colored font throughout, that's not a great thing. So your resume and your CV is going to look kind of boring, okay? And that's okay. What I want you're going to get filtered because of the content that you have listed, the keywords that you have listed, not because you have some like fancy template that is, creating columns or gray shading throughout. The example that I give to this is I was working with a postdoc, told me she stayed up until like past midnight working on her materials for an application, hit submit, woke up at 6 a.m. the next morning to a rejection. Did a human being reject her? No. It was just a computer filtering out because she hadn't done a good enough job, incorporating those keywords. So use AI to help you with this. I do not want you to use AI or these tools to write them for you. That I've played around with it. It creates very odd resumes, like with very antiquated sections people don't use anymore. So it's just not up to date for this. So I don't want you to have it write your cover letter for you, write your resume, etc. But I think it can be a really helpful way to tailor your documents accordingly. So you can say things like, these are some prompts. Review these bullet points for clarity and impact in accordance with this job description. Rewrite this qualification summary best based on this job description. Showcase the top 5 relevant skills I should highlight for this job, and then make sure that you're incorporating that. So you give it small snippets. I actually really like AI in the sense that I think it's leveled the playing field because employers have been using AI for years to sort through all of our applications. And now there's a chance to kind of like use some of the same technology in order to get filtered through. So take advantage of it. Just note that recruiters are asking if you're using it. And honesty is the best policy. And also highlighting that it's a tool that you use to help effectively demonstrate your skills and experience, but that it wasn't written entirely from AI. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. So a few more things on cover letters, and then we're going to kind of wrap up, and I'm going to see what questions you all have. Okay. So even though that wasn't in the title of the talk today, I have included some information about cover letters because I think that you should always send a cover letter with your resume or CV. They really do go hand in hand. The exception being that sometimes I will see job ads say no cover letters. That's pretty rare. If it says that, I obviously defer to that. But employers are often using a cover letter as a mini writing sample. It's a way to assess your English communication skills. It can kind of give them a glimpse into who you are as a candidate. It can be your way to explain any changes or wonky bits in your resume or CV. And it's basically just helping them to determine if you understand the needs of their organization. So when you're writing your cover letter, if possible, address it to a specific person. This can be hard to find. So sometimes this information is like very difficult to assess, but do your best, LinkedIn, sleuthing, poking around to see who the hiring manager is, who the person was, who the boss would be, and address it to that person if possible. If you can't find them, it's okay to say, to whom it may concern, dear search committee, dear hiring manager, and leave it like that. You should be brief but inclusive. Non-academic cover letters should never be more than 1 page. Academic cover letters can be more than 1 page. And by academic cover letters, I mean like tenure track faculty goals. Okay. When you're writing these documents, avoid contractions and acronyms. That's the same is true for your resumes. Those are not caught by the ATS systems, so spell things out. If you're not a native English speaker, always have a native English speaker read it before you send it out. Even if you are a native English speaker, have somebody else look at it. Spell check, it doesn't catch everything. I've seen some really unfortunate typos throughout my career. And just to make sure that you're marketing yourself effectively. And the last one, do not put this on NIH letterhead. The number of trainees that I see put their cover letters on NIH training or NIH letterhead is shocking to me. You are not applying to a job for yourself from the NIH, right? So let's take that off. You're not allowed to use that. Okay, we do have a guide to cover letters, which is listed here. There are some samples. There's a postback, with an email inquiry about lab openings, postdoc applying to faculty positions, a grad student applying to industry. So there's a lot of samples listed there. The general format for cover letters, the last thing that I'll talk about cover letters before we kind of go to some of the final do's and don'ts. It's generally 4 paragraphs, okay? So first paragraph is why them. Second and third paragraph are why you. The fourth paragraph, you're summarizing and thanking them for their consideration. So the why them paragraph, you need to give a little bit of context. Why specifically this institute? This can also be your place to name drop if you've networked with somebody, if your PI introduced you to somebody, referred you, that can be, as long as it's okay, like okay with everyone, that can be your place to do that. The second and third paragraph, why you, I want you to focus on skill sets. Okay, so maybe you're focusing on your analytical skills in one paragraph. Maybe you're focusing on your leadership skills in the next paragraph, and giving examples that are referenced on your resume or CV. Last paragraph is the easiest. Thank them for their consideration, express your interest in an interview to talk about your candidacy. And all of this is usually a business letter format. So that actually means you only have about 3/4 of a page of text that you have to write. So it shouldn't be that heavy of a lift. And sometimes people just omit it and don't do it entirely, but take the time to try. Okay, some final do's and don'ts. Let's start with the don'ts. So a lot of these I've mentioned throughout the talk, but just to kind of reiterate, don't use personal pronouns on your resume or CV. You can use personal pronouns on your cover letter, and you should use personal pronouns in your cover letter. But on a resume or a CV, you omit things like I help research, my team does this, right? So you do kind of speak in the third person, which feels a little bit awkward, but it's just the way it is. Don't use a template. It's very apparent when you're using a template. And for all the reasons that I mentioned about the ATS systems, I don't recommend templates. You do not need to label your document CV or resume. So just have your name and contact information up top. Converting it to a PDF. We all have different screens. We all use different operating systems. Sometimes I've seen people email things to me and their name is off the document, right? Looked great on their screen, didn't look great on mine. So make sure you're converting it to a PDF and always have somebody else take a look at it. OIT is here to help with that. So we do document critiques. So if you need assistance, want another set of eyes on your document, feel free to take advantage of the career counselors here. Okay, so some do's. Try to be consistent throughout your document. Structure all of your sections the same. This means the same font, the same size. I don't have a preference. I don't have a go-to list of like the font styles that you should use. Whatever works for you. But don't, I remember I looked at a document recently and it was like they used a different font style for every single like section. It was like no style left untouched. And it just created a really not uniform package. So make sure that you're thinking about this as a package overall. Your font size should be between 10 to 14. So your name should be the largest thing on your document. Do not go below 10. Okay. Size 10 is the absolute lowest that you should go. Make sure that you're listing dates and locations for all of your activities and experiences, including trainings, including honors awards. I need to know the dates for that. Sometimes HR will actually go through and verify this information before an offer is officially extended. And if something's amiss, that can be a red flag for them. So make sure that you're being consistent with this. The other thing that goes through for every section, everything should be in reverse chronological order. So you might see your PI's resume is in chronological order. That may have been great for them at the time when they were on the job market. But right now, it should be reverse chronological order. That means the most recent first and foremost to the person of past. And put your name and page number on each page after the first, okay? You can throw that in as a header or a footer as you wish, but make sure that it's not listed somewhere. Okay. I mentioned AI. There are some other tools that you can use to tailor your resume for each application. I don't really use Word. I don't recommend Wordle as much anymore, but it used to be something that people could upload their resume and it would create a word cloud, and you kind of see like what was popping out the most in terms of what people would be noticing most from your documents. So it was kind of like a nice visual. But I actually think jobscan.co is probably one of the AI tools that has been around for a while to help you. You can copy and paste the job ad, your resume. It will tell you how well you're matching based on the description. It will note keywords that you're missing. So that can be beneficial. They will prompt you to like buy the premium version. You don't need to. I think the basic version is totally fine. But I also would just take advantage of like whatever your favorite AI tool is to help make sure that you're tailoring. By the end of your experience, you're probably going to have a different version of your resume or CV for every single place that you apply. And that means you're doing it effectively. That means you're doing it well. There's some resources. We have a YouTube channel. We have our guides. And then I want to hear what questions you all have. So while those of you in the room are thinking about questions, I'm going to look at the questions online. Okay, yeah, recording will be sent out. Yeah, you can also read, like, the question is, how about reviewing articles for journals? That would go under professional service. That's something that I often see listed on CVs. Another question, can we include the advanced courses and trainings taken completed, trainings like animal model training, first aid training? Absolutely. I often recommend putting in a professional development or training section and listing things like that.
Can we do that too in the resume?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
For training.
What about volunteering? Would that help on a resume? So volunteering, I think, is one of the things that might help if you are applying for a clinically related position. And depending on what you're applying to, like sometimes I'll work with postdocs who are applying to clinical psych PhD programs, genetic counseling programs. They are really going to expect to see like community service or volunteering in some capacity. So that could be really important for those of you applying for more like research PhDs or roles. Nice to have, but it's not going to be a must-have. Instead of the links, can we put QR codes? I often do see people putting QR codes. I actually think links are a little bit better because usually people are looking at on a desktop, not on a phone. We need to include phone numbers too, or just email acceptable. I think you should include a phone number too, and not just an email. There are a number of, I was working with somebody a few weeks ago who was like, yeah, all of the positions that I've applied to, they just like to cold call you. So cold call and like set up an interview that way, but it's kind of like almost like a first screening. So I think most employers are expecting a phone number too. Yeah.
So if the job that you are applying to does not explicitly ask for a cover letter, do you just voluntarily just give them one anyway?
I do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So usually there is a place that you can upload a cover letter. And when in doubt, sometimes I also see people save the document together. So like they'll save like their resume cover letter as one document, so it just goes through. Yes, yeah, yeah.
How do we best do like one-on-one like document review or interview prep with OIT? How does
Good
that?
question. So we have online calendars, so you can make appointments online. So so if you just go to OITE Career Services, you'll see all of the career counseling appointments available, and you can just pick and choose what date works best for you. We have a mix of in-person and virtual options. And depending on where you're at, we also have counselors that go to the Baltimore campus, the Frederick campus. So we can also meet in person there, but usually Zoom is easy enough to do too. Yeah. Other questions from the room? Okay, let me keep looking at the online questions. Yeah, including a LinkedIn profile link is acceptable. Should the dates for degrees be conferral dates or dates of award graduation? For example, my master's was awarded in October, but conferred in April, so I would probably put October, the date that it's awarded. The NIH have a CV template for quad review. No, we don't have something specifically for that, but we have the general overview. Okay, so I think those are all the questions online. Okay, other thoughts, questions about resumes, CVs, cover letters, anything else on your mind for job search documents? Yeah.
So I think, at least in my case, what if you had, a lot of research experience in different labs and it's really hard to fit like all of those on a resume, for example? Because I remember when I was like, I have a CV, it's like 4 pages long, but then I felt like at some point when I was an undergrad, they would make me like, come up with a resume if you're applying to some like chemical engineering job or whatever. Then I was like, I feel like I'm like cherry picking from my CV because I just don't have enough space to like fit everything. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like,
No, you're doing it right.
okay.
So you should have a master document. So it's often recommended that you have like a master CV that you do cherry pick from. And it's going to be depending on the type of position that you're applying to. Not all experiences are going to offer the same weight or relevance. So that's okay to do. And the other thing is for a resume, you don't actually have to list everything that you've done, right? So like sometimes people will be like, well, I worked here and, that's my most recent experience, but I really want to highlight this experience instead. And I'm like, leave it off. Like, you don't have to list it. So, that can feel strange to do, but especially for a resume, it's a marketing document. So you really want to make sure that you're marketing what you think is the most effective, first and foremost. It is hard to fit the space. Resumes, like the white space is a premium. I often make my margins narrow. I like go through really meticulously to like try and figure out how to maximize all of it. There's a skill to it for sure. Other questions, thoughts? We check online. Also that one. Well, if you do your skill list, author numbers, and a resume, probably not a resume, but you could on a CV, depending on the role. If you have other questions, feel free to email us, or make an appointment, and we can go through everything together. Because often these are like so personal too, right? Like it's one of those things that I've met with a lot of people who are really tied to certain experiences from their CV or their resume, but that are not super important to highlight for a future role. So sometimes it helps just to have an outside perspective of what is going to be important. And also being at the NIH, a lot of people, do go on to academic roles or PhDs or MDs, but there are a fair number of people that we work with that are looking at consulting, finance, various different things, and we can also help with that. Okay, All right, well, wonderful. Thank you all so much for coming today, and please stay connected.
Thank you.
All right, yeah. Hi, everyone online.